That's good. We've had word back from Pittsburgh that Dr. Hunker is feeling somewhat better. He'd had some kind of a major problem this morning there, but it's obviously passing and it's not too serious. So that's the word we've heard. Anyway, we should now move on to the second panel of the day in Partnerships for Crisis Management, and our moderator is Wayne Primo. Sir, you're on.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So welcome to our panel on Partnership for Crisis Management. As you know from the agenda, we have a slight timing problem as we have the second video conferencing call at 11:30. So amongst us, we have decided that what we'll do is we will break it down and have two presenters right now. Then after the conference, the two presenters will give a summary, and then the third presenter will do it. So since all bios and CVs are in your package, I think we'll just start right now. Kevin?
Thank you. Oh, hello. Can you hear me now? Fantastic. If you've read the bios, then you will know that mine is by far the least impressive of the group of people you have to listen to today. So I appreciate you being here and feigning interest for the next 15 minutes. I will try to be suitably entertaining and challenging so that you don't think it's a waste of your time. On the upside, I do have a jazzy PowerPoint presentation. My name is Kevin Rex. I'm a Foreign Service Officer here at DFATE. Just out of curiosity, are there any other DFATE folks in the room? Hey, Alain, good, who's also in uniform. So because I'm a DFATE guy, and this is at a DFATE building, I wanted to start my presentation by noting that the stuff I'm going to talk about, sort of CivMil advice, lessons learned, thoughts, isn't strictly speaking DFATE policy. You can't go and Google this later and we'll find out that, oh, this is how we think. These are observations from myself, other colleagues who've worked extensively in the field. It's stuff we're using to advance our thinking, but I don't want anyone to walk away saying, you know, DFATE said and it is like this. That will be for me, to use military three-letter acronym parlance, a CLM, or a career-limiting move. So please take that all into consideration, that I'm speaking from the heart, but certainly not on behalf of my entire department. As civilians, there's many ways that we work with the military. Afghanistan, of course, is one important example, along with a list of other engagements, such as humanitarian missions in Haiti, United Nations missions, and other combat operations. We adopt different operational procedures and approaches to working together, depending on the situation. But it's critical that wherever or wherever the situation, we find ways to overcome the challenges to taking up a joined-up approach. I've got about 15 minutes. What I'd like to do is look at some of our civil-military learning, some lessons learned, or if perhaps not learned, at least observed, and some observations on a way forward. And the idea here is to try to give some thinking behind whether it's NATO comprehensive approach, or as Mr. Alexander said earlier, the UN's idea of an integrated approach, or what we talk about on the civilian side, whole of government or whole of system, whatever you want to call it, is to give some ideas on how to advance that. Mr. Graham said earlier this morning during his presentation that no two engagements are alike, and that's exactly true. However, one thing that they all share is undertaking them in a coherent, integrated fashion in such challenging environments is never easy. Understanding our respective organizational cultures, mandates, roles, and operating methods is very important. Can you get this? So six sort of themes that I'd like to tackle. The first one is language. And my friend Colonel Irwin, who's going to speak this afternoon, was here. He and I were in Afghanistan at the same time. He was the chief of staff when I was the first civilian advisor. I'm tasked to the Joint Task Force in 2006. And we decided at one point that it was silly that we were sending back military reports and development reports and diplomacy reports. We were meant to be a whole of government mission. Surely we should send back a single whole of government report. And so we took our 3 reports and just put it into one big report and sent it back. And none of the civilian folks could read or understand a single word of the military report. And none of the military folks could read or understand a single component of the civilian report, because we speak very different languages, English or French notwithstanding. And what we ended up doing is having actually an editorial board where we would sit down and go through each other's work, because we really didn't speak the same language. And this is something you may have seen if you were in the field. If you're going to go out on tour with an infantry platoon, and the guy said, right, we're going to wreck you out to a fob, then we're going to check our arcs, meet up with the omelet, and do some KLEs, you would really have no, does anyone know what that meant? No? A few people, right? But so not most people. to be an equal opportunity maker funner person, a CETA officer, on the other hand, might say to a senior military official, what we'd like to do is use some IAE funds in line with the Paris principles so as to support local ownership and engage the NSP. You know, the exact same example. Diplomats, on the other hand, of course, spoke perfectly clear. Everyone understood us all the time. So language is a very important consideration, and let's not presume that we all speak the same language. We certainly don't. Consultation and planning. Ultimately, the aim of working together is about helping each other meet the overall strategic objective. As policy experts at Foreign Affairs, our role is to try to provide advice and to drive operational thinking and create synergy. For us, that means that we have to consult at all stages. And if you've ever worked at this department, you spend 3/4 of your day being consulted by other people and being asked to comment all the time. And while it's very consultative, it can in fact be rather maddening. But different departments and agencies have different operational cultures and different approaches in a number of areas. The extent to which they consult, the levels at which they consult, the frequency at which they consult is quite frankly not always the same. Adding to the challenge is the civilian perspective, at least, that there's a strict military chain of command that doesn't seem to always allow for outside input. So with respect to planning, militaries, particularly in the field in an operational environment, have a very goal-oriented, very finely tuned planning process. But this planning process is not at all intuitive for the civilian colleagues who operate with them. And in fact, it's very seldom actually adaptable to governance and development goals which we're trying to achieve in the field. So integrated planning across government is the goal that we're talking about. The idea is to develop a single comprehensive plan rather than a series of departmental plans that try to then act comprehensively. This means that integrated planning needs to start at the very level of intent and carry through strategic, operational, and tactical levels. This is already fairly well advanced amongst our colleagues in the United Kingdom, and I don't know if there's any folks from the UK here. But through their Foreign Office, their Department for International Development, and the Ministry of Defense's MMC, Military Stabilization Support Group, they've actually developed cross-governmental stabilization planning teams at both the headquarters level in London and at the tactical level in the field. Timelines. Simply put, civilian timelines are longer than those of the military timelines. And even among civilian departments and agencies, we have different timelines. A development agency, for example, can spend literally years planning a project. And these projects can be designed to last for 25 years. Military timelines from the field can last for the duration of a commander's tour, so 6 to 9 months. The Foreign Ministry may be asked to respond very quickly and looks at timelines for 1 to 2 years. So syncing up these timelines can be very frustrating, can be very challenging. Trade-offs, and this is always interesting. Sometimes I'm invited to talk to some military courses, and I really like the section on trade-offs, and I would quiz them sometimes, which I won't do for you here. But the idea behind trade-offs is that there are inherent conflicts that exist between what we're trying to do on the ground based on our respective cultures. These conflicts then, to solve them, call for compromises. And in order to compromise, we have to be willing to dilute our own department's policy agenda. Some examples of trade-offs are stability versus host nation legitimacy, meeting needs versus building capacity, or expediency versus sustainability. So a good example from our Afghanistan experience was something very simple as buying generators for a local community/cultural center. So the CIMIC sort of military perspective might be, right, the generators are cheap, we have the resources, we can buy the generators right now, install them tomorrow. We provided electricity for this community center. Community center can then function, we're bringing people together, we've supported that community, we've done a great job. Absolutely true. The civilian perspective, however, might be, great, what happens to the generator when it runs out of gas? What happens to the generator when it breaks down? Is it a Canadian generator? Do we now own the generator for the rest of our life? Every time it runs out of gas, will someone knock at the PRT and we'll be expected to fix this generator? Also entirely true. My point is, I don't actually know what the right answer is, but both perspectives are entirely accurate, entirely true, and entirely at conflict with one another. So sorting that out in the field, in the heat of battle or in the heat of conflict, is another serious challenge. Resources. Some departments, I'm not going to point fingers, have more resources than other departments. And certainly the military in the field has significantly more people. I deployed to Haiti after the earthquake as the head of the civilian stabilization team that went out. We were working in concert with Operation Hestia, which was the military team that went out. So I had my civilian team, and the military had their team. There were 2,000 of them, and there were 7 of us. That 7 of us represented 100% of our immediate deployable capacity from the Stabilization and Reconstruction Task Force. And the 2,000 military, which was a massive deployment for a humanitarian operation, I believe the largest in Canadian history, was huge, but still didn't mean that headquarters were empty or anything like that. So reconciling 2,000 men and women with 7 men and women is also a challenge, and it creates frustrations on the ground. We're not able to be everywhere for everyone, and the military then gets frustrated that we're not always able to work with them when they want us to, and we get frustrated in that we feel overwhelmed and under-resourced and sometimes underloved. I don't have any clever Canadian comparisons, so I apologize for using an American one, and I appreciate it's not exactly the same, but I do love this quote. Former US Secretary of Defense Gates liked to point out that there are more musicians in US military marching bands than there are US Foreign Service officers. Someone else then went on to say, in fact, the Pentagon has 10 times as many accountants as the United States Foreign Service has Foreign Service officers, so just by way of comparison. Reporting and classification. Being integrated demands that we work horizontally. The problem in a Westminster system is that we report through our ministers vertically. So how do you square this peg, if you will? In a given country, we need to ensure that we work together to advise and support the ambassador and embassy resources. So we're trying to focus our energies, but at the same time, we have these constant vertical demands. No easy answers, just pointing out some of the challenges. Next slide, please. So from this, 5 key, I was talking last night about lessons learned, and a former colonel that I worked with at the Privy Council office said, learned or perhaps just observed, and I think he's right, oh good, I didn't say learned there. So just lessons observed. And we've got 5 of them. First, in order to implement a sophisticated approach that recognizes the interplay between security, governance, and development, we need to think, plan, and act comprehensively. We need to adopt a coordinated and complementary approach among international actors, partners, countries, and the host nation. We need to agree on a common vision, shared priorities, and understand our respective capabilities. No one department, agency, or country, for that matter, has all the tools needed to be effective. So we must be joined up from the outset if we're going to achieve, the desired effect on the ground. A success case in the Canadian context were the latter years of the Afghanistan mission, where after a lot of work and a lot of time and energy, Canada developed 6 shared policy priorities with concrete metrics associated with each, which was critical for delivering tangible effects. Through joint planning, leadership, intelligence sharing, resource allocation, and communications, we developed a single unified strategy based on single common analysis of the context and agreement on the next steps to take. Second, each engagement requires an approach tailored to specific national, regional, and local contexts. Again, as Mr. Graham said at the beginning, no 2 missions are exactly the same. Needs vary, as do the casts of characters, and the tools that we need to draw on as a result. So this requires a selective case-by-case analysis, an application of our capabilities, and clarity on roles and responsibilities, including between civilian and military actors. Third and related is a critical need to ensure integrated civilian-military planning and coherence from the outset, and to facilitate effective integration at all stages. We need to build better systems of cooperation through joint training and exchanges, the development of standard operating procedures, so that we are able to reduce the reliance on personality-driven cooperation and increase joint analysis based on shared intelligence. We must also promote shared lessons through joint after-action reviews. And I'm going to embarrass him now, but the lieutenant colonel in the back is one of the positive results of talking about joint interoperability and sharing resources. So after a few years of nagging, we were able to get him to come and spend some quality time and start. And I think he's asleep in the back, actually. And he's there. So clearly having a fun time here at Foreign Affairs. Fourth, we must enable the early, substantive, and sustained engagement of civilian experts. And this is sort of what I'm trying to do here at Foreign Affairs now. These experts are focused on building the host government's capacity. How am I doing? 13 minutes. Are focused on building the host government's capacity for security, governance, economic development, and the establishment of the rule of law through the transfer of knowledge, technology, mentoring, and training. Multidimensional peace operations require an application of a range of capabilities, many of which are not specialities of the military, nor should they be, quite frankly. Fostering justice and security sector reform, supporting the reconciliation process, providing support to IDPs are just a few, activities that have a civilian focus. And the fifth takeaway is the importance of establishing clear metrics and undertaking sober assessments. So we all know what we're doing, we all agree that we know what we're doing, and we all agree that we're trying to measure what we're doing in the same fashion. And the final slide, some takeaways. That's me with a tragic hair day on the first picture. We should be developing a more consistent approach to engagement strategies for fragile states. In addition to greater consistency in governance and coordination arrangements, while simultaneously augmenting our ability to deliver in these most difficult of contexts. So we need to ensure strategic clarity while preserving operational flexibility. We need to augment our coherence of efforts, which involve multiple departments, while respecting ministerial accountability. And we need to enable the capacity for rapid, sustained, and multifaceted deployments of not only the military, but civilian actors as well. We need to reflect hard on these lessons learned from our experiences and make sure, very importantly, that we are all learning the same lessons, because that often is not the case. We need to remain mindful of risks. Becoming too coherent nationally can make you less flexible internationally. We need to seek to play off the Canadian comparative advantage. And finally, friends, we must always collectively remember that we are working towards the same strategic objective. Our individual roles, methods, and spheres will be different, making working together sometimes difficult, but essential to true success. I'll look forward to your questions later. Thank you.